The movie begins by showing a man named Bob who worked as a bartender. Bob introduced a unique bar called Drop Bar, which seemed like an ordinary place, but it secretly served as a safe haven for mobsters to launder their ill-gotten money. Since the money couldn't be deposited in a bank, it kept flowing in and out of the bar, with officers regularly coming to collect it and transport it elsewhere. The bar owners had no clue when they would be designated as a drop bar by the mobsters. One fateful night, Bob served a group of customers who had gathered to remember their deceased friend, who had died under mysterious circumstances 10 years ago. Out of kindness, Bob decided to offer them a round of drinks for free. However, the bar's manager, Cousin Marv, scolded Bob, reminding him that they were running a business and not a charity. Marv knew that the bar actually belonged to a mobster, so he didn't want to disappoint them. The next day, Bob attended church, showcasing his devout nature despite working in a bar. On his way home that night, he heard a whimpering sound coming from his neighbor's trash can. Investigating further, Bob discovered an injured puppy abandoned inside. Just then, the homeowner, Nadia, came out, suspicious of Bob entering her yard. Bob showed Nadia the puppy he had found, but she insisted on checking his identification and even took a picture to share with her friends, ensuring Bob hadn't harmed the dog. Nadia then asked Bob to take the dog to his home. While caring for the puppy, Nadia shared that she used to work in an animal rescue unit. During their conversation, Bob noticed a scar on Nadia's neck, but she quickly diverted his attention by asking him to take the dog away. However, Bob, who had stumbled upon the puppy by chance, instead requested Nadia to care for it. Unfortunately, Nadia declined, citing lack of time to do so. Upon hearing Bob's plea, Nadia felt a pang of sympathy for the dog and reluctantly agreed to take care of it temporarily, with the understanding that Bob would come back for it in 2 days' time. The following night, two criminals, unaware of the bar's connection to a mobster, set their sights on Marv's establishment for a robbery. Until now, Marv had been the sole manager, keeping the true nature of the bar a secret. As closing time approached, the two bandits stormed in, brandishing their guns at Bob and Marv. They demanded that Marv gather all the money and place it in a bag. Marv attempted to warn the robbers about the dangerous people they were dealing with, emphasizing the ownership of the money. However, the criminals paid no heed. Amid the tense standoff, Bob noticed that one of the robbers wore a broken watch. As soon as they obtained the cash, the two thieves hastily made their escape. Bob and Marv then discovered the battered bar doorman, who had been assaulted by the robbers earlier. Shortly after the incident, Detective Torres arrived to investigate the crime. Interestingly, Torres recognized Bob from their shared attendance at the same church over the years. During the questioning, Bob couldn't provide much information due to the robbers' masked faces. However, he did mention the distinctive broken watch worn by one of the criminals. Once the officers departed, Marv expressed disappointment in Bob for divulging details about the broken watch to Detective Torres. Marv also revealed that the stolen amount totaled $5,000, indicating that they would need to brace themselves for the wrath of the mafia. The following day, Bob went to retrieve his puppy from Nadia. Recognizing his lack of experience in caring for an animal, Bob asked Nadia to accompany him to buy the necessary supplies. At a shop, Nadia provided him with various items for taking care of the puppy. They even decided on a name for him, Rocco. With their shopping done, Bob and Nadia headed back home. Unbeknownst to them, a man named Eric had been watching their every move. The next day, while Bob and Marv were clearing snow in the bar's backyard, a car filled with mobsters pulled up. Shavka Umarov, a powerful mafia boss who happened to be the owner of the bar, approached them. It turned out that Shavka recognized one of the men as the culprit behind the robbery that had taken place. However, both Marv and Bob claimed they couldn't identify the man since the robbers had been wearing masks. Despite their pleas of innocence, Shavka ordered them to retrieve his stolen money. After the mobsters departed, Marv suspected that Shavka's demand was a trap. If they were to find the money, it would implicate them in the robbery, leading to dire consequences for both of them. Meanwhile, Detective Torres met up with his partner from the Major Crimes Division. Torres revealed that 10 years ago, Marv's bar had been taken over by a mobster named Papa Umarov, who was Shavka's father. Ever since, the bar had been operating as a front company for Papa Umarov's illicit activities. Torres suspected that Shavka had orchestrated the robbery as part of a plan to overthrow his father's reign, and he asked his partner to gather information about Umarov. Unfortunately, his colleagues informed him that Umarov was too influential to touch. Under the cover of darkness, Marv has a clandestine meeting with a man named Fitz, who happens to be one of the robbers involved in the bar heist. During their encounter, it is revealed that Marv himself orchestrated the robbery. Marv expresses displeasure towards Fitz for assaulting the barman, as it necessitated calling an ambulance and subsequently involving the police. He also instructs Fitz's brother to dispose of the broken watch, as both the police and the mafia are already aware of its existence. Marv mentions the likelihood of their bar soon becoming a drop bar for the mob, advising Fitz to execute future heists more smoothly. The following morning, Bob enjoys some playtime with Rocco at a park. Not long after, Nadia, who had been exercising nearby, approaches him. Nadia confesses that her working hours have been reduced and offers to care for Rocco as a means to earn extra income. Upon hearing Nadia's proposal, Bob eagerly accepts and asks for her phone number to coordinate the arrangements. Once Nadia departs, Eric appears and briefly comments on Bob's dog before swiftly departing, leaving Bob feeling suspicious. Simultaneously, a motorist approaches Marv, seeking directions to the hospital. Marv provides the necessary information but becomes increasingly paranoid, fearing that the stranger may be one of Chavka's men. While Bob arrives home and apologizes to Rocco for their hurried return, the doorbell suddenly rings. To his surprise, it's Eric standing there. Eric insists on being let in, as if they were already acquainted. He immediately lays claim to Bob's dog, asserting that Rocco belongs to him. Eric even displays a chip with a serial number, supposedly embedded in the dog's body, as evidence of ownership. However, Bob remains steadfast in his belief that Rocco is his own, citing Eric's mistreatment of the dog as a reason. Eric goes as far as threatening to report Bob to the police, accusing him of animal abuse. In the midst of the tense confrontation, Eric grabs Bob's umbrella before leaving. At noon, Bob and Nadia meet at a cafe. Nadia confides in Bob, expressing her appreciation for him being the first person who didn't inquire about the scar on her neck. Bob believes it's not his place to pry and assures Nadia that she can share the details when she feels comfortable. True to his word, Nadia, feeling at ease with Bob, reveals that she accidentally injured her neck with a potato peeler while under the influence of illegal drugs. However, their conversation is abruptly interrupted when they are expelled from the cafe due to bringing along a dog. Upon returning to the bar, Marv expresses concern, sensing that they are being followed. He suspects that Eric is stalking Bob, even though Bob explains that Eric merely wants his dog back. While they are clearing out the trash behind the bar, they stumble upon a plastic bag containing bloodied money and a severed hand still wearing a watch. This discovery leads them to realize that the stolen money had been reported missing and that one of the robbers had met a grisly fate. Yet, they remain perplexed about who returned the money and the motivations behind such an act. Bob carefully wrapped the severed hand, a task that Marv noticed he had done before. Suddenly, Eric entered the bar, prompting Marv to try and shoo him away. Eric greeted Bob, sending regards to Nadia. After Eric left, Marv inquired about the connection between Bob and Eric. Bob explained that Eric claimed to be the rightful owner of his dog. Upon hearing this, Marv grew even more concerned. He revealed that Eric was a local thug rumored to have kidnapped and killed a man named Richie 10 years ago, the same person the bar patrons had gathered to remember. Marv informed Bob that Eric had a history of repeated incarcerations and had spent time in a mental hospital. He urged Bob to stay away from Eric. However, Bob showed no signs of fear and decided to pursue the matter with the severed hand. As Bob left, Marv suddenly broke down in tears, as if he knew who was responsible for killing the robber. Elsewhere, Bob disposed of the severed hand by tossing it into the sea. Shortly after, Detective Torres arrived and inquired about Eric, as Marv had previously mentioned. Torres mentioned that Eric was allegedly connected to the case of Richie's disappearance. However, Bob admitted that he had never met Eric. In the afternoon, Bob met Nadia to drop off his dog and took the opportunity to ask if she knew Eric. Nadia denied any knowledge and unexpectedly grew angry, leaving without providing an explanation. Later that evening, Chavka met with them at the bar to reclaim the stolen money. Chavka also revealed that the bar would serve as a drop bar on Super Bowl night. At night, Nadia waited for Bob and apologized for her earlier behavior. She then confessed that she had dated Eric in the past. Initially, Eric seemed like a decent person, but over time, she discovered his true sinister nature, which eventually led to their breakup. Nadia also warned Bob that Eric was the one who had killed Richie. However, Bob, who was already aware of this, showed no surprise. Their conversation held a warm tone, but Bob had no intentions of seizing the opportunity. Instead, he kindly drove Nadia home, refraining from offering a goodbye kiss, despite being aware of Nadia's desire for one. Upon returning home, Bob discovered Eric's umbrella placed inside his dog's kennel, indicating that Eric had been present. Meanwhile, Marv encounters Fitz and persuades him to get into the car. Initially suspicious due to his brother's previous demise in a similar situation, Fitz hesitates to enter. However, after ensuring that Marv's car trunk is not covered in plastic and catching a glimpse of the weapon hidden beneath it, Fitz reluctantly agrees to accompany Marv. The plastic in the trunk is meant to prevent blood from dripping onto the streets. During the journey, Marv devises a plan to carry out a heist on the night of the Super Bowl. His objective is to secure double the money they had returned to Chavka and seek revenge for his brother's death. However, Fitz refuses, valuing his own life and promising to keep Marv's plans a secret. Hearing this, Marv instructs Fitz to exit the car and close the previously opened trunk. But as Fitz complies, a sudden and grim fate befalls him. Marv runs him over with the car and swiftly departs the scene, utilizing another vehicle he had prepared. This disturbing act reveals Marv's willingness to eliminate witnesses from his plans. The implication is that Marv is the perpetrator of Fitz's fratricide. Fitz's brother's severed hand was deliberately left for Bob to find, intended to make him a witness against the unsuspecting Chavka. Simultaneously, Marv wanted both Bob and Fitz to believe that Chavka was the true culprit. The following day, Marv encountered Eric, who was dining at a restaurant. Marv fabricated a lie, stating that Bob was afraid of Eric. He proposed a solution that would benefit all parties without resorting to conflict, involving Eric in a robbery on the night of the Super Bowl. This way, Eric would no longer bother Bob once they acquired the money. In a different location, Torres meets with his partner and obtains Eric's psychological records, which reveal shocking information about him. Meanwhile, Bob visits Eric's house and firmly declares that he will not return Rocco. In response, Eric demands $10,000 from Bob if he still wants to keep Rocco. In reality, this was Marv's plan, as he had previously enticed Fitz to rob double the amount of their initial heist. Bob, known for his gentle and calm nature, doesn't react to Eric's threat, deeming it unreasonable. Marv pays a visit to Bob at his house, explaining that he won't be present at the bar during the Super Bowl night due to feeling unwell. Unbeknownst to Bob, Marv is actually avoiding the mobsters because he is still bitter about losing control of the bar. He requests Bob's understanding, yet Bob senses that Marv may be planning something risky. However, Marv chooses not to disclose his plans. Upon returning home, Bob retrieves the money he had been saving. In his mind, Bob suspects that Marv has a plan in mind, as the amount Eric is demanding is precisely double the money they had returned to Chavka. Bob speculates that they may be intending to split the money between them. As a precautionary measure, Bob places a gun and the money in the bar's drawer. Meanwhile, Eric forcefully breaks into Nadia's house and compels her to accompany him to the bar. Initially resistant, Nadia ultimately chooses not to provoke the thug and complies with his demands. At the bar, Bob begins his duties, receiving money from the arriving mobsters. During the night, Bob feels a sense of disappointment as he witnesses Nadia entering the bar with Eric. Simultaneously, Marv lined the trunk of his car with plastic. At the bar, Bob asks Eric to prepare Rocco's documents in exchange for the requested $10,000. However, their conversation is interrupted by Marv's call to Eric. Hearing a commotion, Marv realizes that Eric has already arrived at the bar, causing him to grow angry as Eric arrives before closing time. Marv warns Eric not to underestimate Bob, despite his seemingly meek appearance. Throughout the night, various mafia groups take turns delivering money until the bar is emptied, leaving only Eric and Nadia. Eric reveals his gun to Nadia before stepping outside for a smoke. Nadia takes this opportunity to inform Bob of how Eric forced her to come to the bar and warns him that Eric is armed. Meanwhile, Marv leaves his house and parks his car 2 blocks away from the bar, closely monitoring the unfolding events. Inside the bar, Eric enters and Bob hands him the prepared $10,000. However, Bob's assumption proves incorrect as Eric reveals his true intention, to obtain the mafia's money stored in the safe. Eric realizes that the safe opens silently for a period of 90 seconds at regular intervals. He demands that Bob hand over all the money from the safe. Upon hearing this, Bob realizes that Marv had planned this all along, confirming that their deal of $10,000 was merely a cover for the price of a dog. To make matters worse, Eric asks Bob how much Nadia is worth to him. To divert any suspicion towards Marv, Eric pretends to inquire about his whereabouts. Bob seizes the opportunity to explain that Marv had struggled with a severe gambling problem, and there was a young man who owed him a significant amount of money. 10 years ago, a young man won a large sum of money at the casino and used it to pay off his debt to Marv. However, Marv didn't want anyone to know that the debt was settled, so he asked Bob to kill the young man. Without hesitation, Bob shot the young man twice in the face and dismembered his body. He stored the remains in a tank located in the basement of the bar. To everyone's surprise, Bob reveals that the young man, named Richie, was believed to have been finished off by Eric. And even more shockingly, Bob confesses that he took care of Eric as well. Behind his calm facade, Bob unveils his true nature as a cold-blooded killer. After these acts, Bob assures Nadia that people like Eric will keep coming back, so they must be eliminated. He allows the frightened Nadia to leave, promising her safety from harm. As Nadia departs, Eric's phone rings, indicating a call from Marv. Neither Bob nor Marv says a word, but this revelation confirms to Bob that Marv is the mastermind behind it all. Bob proceeds to dismember Eric's body and wraps the pieces. Shortly thereafter, Chavka's group arrives to collect the money and Eric's remains. Chavka offers Bob the opportunity to manage the bar from now on. It turns out that Chavka had been aware of Marv's ill intentions and had already dispatched one of his men to eliminate him. The following day, Detective Torres arrives to investigate the death of Marv and the disappearance of Eric. Torres informs Bob that according to police records, Eric was documented as being in a mental hospital at the time of Richie's disappearance, making it seemingly impossible for him to be involved. Before leaving, Torres expresses suspicions about Bob. In the afternoon, Bob brings Rocco to Nadia's house and apologizes for involving her. He asks Nadia to forbid him from seeing her again. However, instead of requesting Bob to stay away, Nadia agrees to go out with him. The moral of the story is sometimes, in the midst of a wild and unpredictable series of events, the heart will find a way to connect, even in the strangest of circumstances. Love can bloom even when severed hands and criminal activities are involved.